So I'm going to take a minute to introduce Janis. So Janis contacted me, I believe it was in April, and we very quickly, within I think the second email, connected on the issue of boundaries in post-production. We both felt that that was very important in order to protect ourselves from toxic work environments and abuse. And I was very excited that she agreed to give a talk on this subject. And a little bit about her. So she is both an editor and assistant editor, which is really amazing. She has edited a variety show called Z-Way on Showtime. And most recently, she's been the assistant editor on the feature film Past Lives, which is in theaters right now, and it's getting terrific reviews. So check that out. Has anybody seen the film Past Lives? Nice. All right, excellent. Let's see. She will be doing Q&A at the end of her talk, so definitely please engage. Most of the speakers will be doing Q&A. She has also worked in both New York City and Los Angeles, and she's the co-founder of the Blue Collar Post Collective, which is a wonderful organization for people that need mentorship or want to mentor other people. So if you're not familiar with the Blue Collar Post Collective, definitely check them out on Facebook. They're also a promotional partner of ours. Is there anyone from BCPC here today? Okay, wonderful, wonderful. All right, so with that all said, let's give a very warm welcome for Janis.
Testing. Hi. The truth is, I was madly in love, and I was willing to do whatever it took to prove it. I would stay up all night, and one morning I was driving home through standstill LA traffic in my '88 Mazda hatchback with a spontaneously honking horn, when suddenly my car rear-ended a truck in front of me. I had fallen asleep at the wheel. A man jumped out of the truck, and he wasn't mad. He just asked me if I was okay. And luckily I was. I drove to a nearby McDonald's parking lot, and I slept it off. The lover I left behind was a movie about a talking dog that I had the great privilege of working on for free as a volunteer production assistant. That was my first industry job in 2006. Since then, I've edited and produced dozens of films, commercials, television shows, music videos. I've made it, but I deeply believe there's a better way. I'm Janis Vogel. I'm a film and television producer and editor. I'm the co-founder of the Blue Collar Post Collective. I'm a certified life coach and mentor, and I'm the mother of one 4-year-old, Zima. I got into this business because I wanted to be creative every day. When I asked around about what it would take to make it in this industry, I was willingly indoctrinated into a culture of fear. Pay your dues, say yes to everything that comes your way, and be the hungriest person in the room. Let's archive those terms. It's a time of great upheaval in our industry between the writers' strike, the ongoing effects of the pandemic, the state of the world. And so it's a great time to assess what needs to change. All of our narratives have shifted. We are storytellers. It's our job to create resonance and connection. And yet so often the culture of this industry creates a disconnect amongst each other and within ourselves. And that's why it's so important for us to gather in community the way we are today. I'm here to invite us to continue a conversation that's beginning to take hold. Editor Paul Rogers won the Oscar for Best Film Editing in 2023 for the film Everything Everywhere All at Once. And he said, let's say it again, there's a problem in our industry that the more you kill yourself for a movie, the braver you are, and that's bullshit. We can do our jobs and we can live our lives, and the more fully we can live our lives, the better we can do our jobs. I couldn't agree more. So let's redefine bravery. Let's rewrite what it takes to make it in this industry. I believe that to be our most creative, we need to take care of our greatest assets, our bodies, our minds, ourselves. So let's reclaim our creative freedom by setting powerful, energetic, kind boundaries without ever saying the word boundary. In my full course, I go through all 10 of these topics, but today we're going to go through the first 5: protecting creativity, defining boundaries, tuning in to basic needs, boundary power tools, and scripting boundaries. I want to preface this by saying that I do understand the limitations of our power. It all begins with ourself. We have a little bit of influence over our team, less over our management, and very little over the industry at large. But we do have control over ourselves. In 2018, I added the title Mother to my resume. And that's when boundaries really became a vital practice for me. I wish I had had those skills sooner, but I really felt like taking care of myself was optional before then. I learned the hard way that I needed to take care of myself first if I wanted my child or my career to thrive. I will never forget the moment where I was standing under the subway in New York City with my 3-month-old child strapped to my body when I got a call from one of my favorite producers offering me a job on a show. I have never been so torn. And yet my child wasn't even taking a bottle, so I ultimately said no to the job. And it was that no that taught me that saying no isn't burning down my career. 7 months later, I got the same offer on the same job, and I said yes. The resume of jobs that I've said no to since then is star-studded. Not only that, against so many odds, I'm still here. And I'm working on projects I love with people I love. So when we dare to take care of ourselves, our creativity can thrive. Let's jump into creativity. I see creativity as a river, like our life force. I like to expand the notion of creativity to include all decision-making and how we walk through our day. Whether we're cooking a meal or doing a spreadsheet or editing a scene, all of those can be done with the quality of creative flow. So let's take a moment to reflect on a project where you were really in creative flow and think about the surroundings and your environment that supported those things in happening. For me, some of my creative values are having a solid morning routine, working near a window, taking breaks outside, collaborating with people I love. These are the things that I need to protect in order for my creativity to flow. And in order to protect them, we need to set boundaries. So let's define boundaries. I define boundaries non-judgmentally as a boundary is something that indicates a border or a limit. Let's mix our metaphors for a minute and think of boundaries as a cellular membrane, like a complex system that allows certain things to exit and certain things to enter, but not everything. When we allow everything to enter, that's like having no boundaries at all. When we think of requests and people and thoughts as entering, and our resources, our time, our energy, our money, as resources that exit the cellular membrane, we can allow that to be a complex system. When it comes to our creative flow, our boundaries are like the banks of the river. So when we have no banks, we're really not a river at all. We're more like a puddle. That's when we're saying yes to everything and ultimately burning out. When we think of our banks of our river as an ecosystem, the edges of ecosystems are known to be rich with resources and able to create resilience. I love that about this analogy. So when we tend the banks of our river, we're saying yes to things that energize us and no to things that deplete us. And in order for us to know what energizes us and depletes us, we need to tune in to our needs and desires. So in this culture, let alone this industry, needs have a pretty bad reputation. Being needy is a concept that we're still working out of our systems. But we are human beings. We are animals. We are plants. And we all have the same basic needs, and even our unique needs are completely valid and human. We make movies, and we wouldn't want to make a film or see a film where people didn't have needs or desires. I spoke to a lot of post-professionals in preparing for this talk, and so many people talked about being asked to give up their personal lives to be on a job. But it's also really important to decipher between what is our personal lives and what are our basic needs. Unfortunately, diminishing our needs and pretending they don't exist really doesn't work. They just kind of knock louder in different ways. And they become a dam in the river of our creative flow. So when someone crosses our boundaries, it's really the feelings, the resentment, the anger, the even slight irritation that becomes a dam in the river of our creative flow. So here's my take on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We all have basic needs: air, food, water, sleep. Breathing, it's so trendy right now. We have the need for all of those basic needs. We have a need for safety, we have a need for belonging, and we have a need for respect. And I love that all of that culminates in our creativity, because creativity is both a need and the result of having our needs met. We are not the survival of the fittest, we are the survival of the nurtured. When we dare to take care of our needs, we cultivate an inner environment that allows our creative rivers to flow. Wise managers understand this. We are creatives, and to be creative, we need to take risks. And in order to take risks, we need to feel safe to do so. So when we meet our needs, we are cultivating self-trust. And when we have self-trust, that's not about knowing that we're going to make it to the other side of that cliff. It's about knowing that if we fall straight down, we're going to have our own backs. Accepting ourselves as whole and human with needs and desires and emotions allows us to develop the self-trust that cultivates the safety that allows us to take creative risks. So in order to cultivate the safety, we need to set boundaries. Let's talk about why boundaries are so tricky to set. One, we're conditioned to believe there aren't even problems. There's an unspoken expectation in this industry that we go above and beyond. Even that phrase connotes that we need to cross our own boundaries in order to be accepted here. Two, we want to avoid conflict. If we do know there's a problem, we feel like we shouldn't be feeling this way. Gratitude becomes a blocker to setting boundaries. Ooh, we're so grateful to be in this industry. We can be grateful to be in this industry and want it to be better. The other G is guilt. We feel guilty setting boundaries. But we need to recognize, are we guilty because we are going against our own values or because we're going against the values created by a system? And we need to push through our discomfort and set boundaries even when it makes us feel guilty for the wrong reasons. Let's advocate for ourselves. The third reason is we don't know what to say. And the fourth reason is we fear belonging. We fear rejection and reaction. It's completely valid to fear rejection and reactions. It's painful to be fired, but let's find managers who aren't going to fire us for meeting our own needs. They're out there. I've had them. We cross our own boundaries because we think there are rewards, promotions, our reputation, recommendations for crossing them. But there are rewards for setting boundaries. When we trust ourselves, others trust us more too. And when we dare to take care of ourselves, our creativity can flow freely. And that is a resource that's valuable both to us and the industry. So what makes setting boundaries easier? Validating yourself, cultivating an environment of curiosity and dialogue, having language that you feel comfortable wielding, and assuming that you're respected. It takes practice to change these patterns. It takes practice for me, but it becomes second nature eventually. I love this concept that Brené Brown talks about. Grit versus grind. Grit is when you say no to make space for a better yes. And grind is when you say yes out of fear of what other people will think. So let's lead lives of grit. Let's make choices that energize us and honor our humanity. When you are coming up against a decision, ask yourself, how does yes feel in my body? And how does no feel in my body? And practice honoring that. Multiple assistant editors I spoke to feared taking a 15-minute break outside. Sometimes it's not the big choices that horrify me in this industry. It's these little micro decisions to take care of ourselves that we need to advocate for the freedom to do. So let's jump into boundaries. I like to divide boundaries into internal and external boundaries, how we enact our boundaries with ourselves and how we enact them with others. When we think about boundaries, we often think about telling people what they can't do and setting rules, but it's really powerful to start by setting boundaries with yourself. So internal boundaries are how we speak with ourselves, what we are willing to do, and on what terms, and how we behave when our boundaries are crossed. These are all conversations with ourselves. If someone told you it wasn't cool to talk to yourself, it's time to start. Because how we speak to ourselves in good times and challenging times is key to our creative flow. When you make a mistake, do you beat yourself up? Don't feel guilty for doing so. It's completely normal and habitual. But it's time to have a second voice that says, hey, I'm not speaking to you that way anymore. Say it in your head, say it out loud, and you'll start creating a new pattern, a new neural pathway, a new stream that feeds your creative flow. When you have a nurturing inner world, that fosters creative flow. External boundaries are boundaries with others, how and when we communicate with others, what we are willing to do and on what terms, and how we behave towards others when our boundaries are crossed. I want to talk about the best time to set boundaries. It's at the beginning of a relationship. It's during the job interview, talking about your needs, asking questions. During the first days on a job, you might talk about the rhythms of your day and what your patterns will be during slow times and busy times. This really sets the tone for in the middle of the job when it's inevitably more stressful than at the beginning. Future pace yourself so that you know what you might be needing at the most stressful times. So you don't need to be adjusting that in the middle. But if you are in the middle of the job and there's boundaries coming to mind that you want to set, just know that you're going to need to push through that discomfort of changing a pattern. After a job is over, that's also a great time to reflect. What boundaries might I have set that would have helped me be more effective in this job? There's so many people who consider leaving this industry. Congrats on being survivors. But we can try to change it before we leave. That's what I'm here to do. It's important to set boundaries as soon as they've been crossed. A lot of us don't realize when our boundaries have been crossed until we're pretty far into it, and that's okay. Here are some ways to know sooner. We often don't set boundaries until we're in the rage triangle. But when we can practice learning that our boundaries have been crossed when we're down at the bottom of our emotional trajectory, then we can set more effective boundaries from a calm place. If you're in rage, you might want to wait until you've de-escalated to have those hard conversations. So I love these like emotional cousins, I want to call them, that I gleaned from this book, Call of the Wild by Kimberly Ann Johnson. Some of us don't move from irritation to anxiety to rage. Some of us actually have an increase of niceness when our boundaries start to get crossed. Some of us experience apathy. We're like so over the job. That's a cue that maybe there's something that needs to be adjusted. And rather than rage, some of us experience complete shutdown or collapse. Or we might start appeasing our coworkers and managers more to try to fix the situation. So knowing these both like light side and dark side cues for crossing boundaries can help you start to recognize it sooner and have more effective conversations. Now, the ultimate boundaries crossed environment is the toxic workplace. These are just some of the characteristics that therapist Nedra Tawwab defines as a toxic workplace. The first three are pretty much normalized in our industry. Working long hours, not being paid for additional hours, and being asked to do more in a limited time frame. Can you just? So the bottom four are complete deal breakers. These are reasons to have a rigid boundary, a really tough conversation where someone's got to go. Negative communication among peers or superiors, being bullied, being sexually harassed, or being mistreated based on race, physical ability, or sexual orientation. I had a client who was very stuck in a toxic work environment. At the end of every day, she was feeling depleted, disrespected, demeaned, and yet she wasn't sure how she was going to get out of it. Her fears were swirling. Like, maybe it's me, everybody else seems fine. No one can replace me because only I know what so-and-so wants for lunch. I'm leaving them in a lurch. What about my reputation? Will this be my last job? She was at the beginning of her career. She was in that time where typically we're told, say yes, say yes, say yes, and like, oh my gosh, how cool is it that you're working on X? And yet she was really unhappy. And so we strategized and we helped her leave gracefully. We de-escalated and slowed down. And we're like, how can we assess this fear? How can we assess this fear? And how can we address these things so that you can leave this workplace without, quote unquote, burning down your career? She felt like she said no and made space for a better yes. And she's working on so many beautiful creative projects that she loves. We deserve managers who respect us. I was recently working on a multiple million-dollar TV show. None of us could remember the exact budget because it was like so much bigger than our paychecks. We were like, erase, get back to work. I had to miss a couple meetings to take my child to school. So I let them know before the job started, and then I reminded them the day before, the day of. I was nervous, and I got the most shocking and wonderful response from my manager, who said, "I'm happy to accommodate, but man, do I wish people had higher standards for their jobs and managers. It shouldn't be such a big thing to say I'm not going to be able to make it to 2 15-minute meetings this week. I am hoping to normalize allowing people to be real, actual humans that aren't held hostage by their jobs." This is like a high-level post-producer. These managers exist, and we should hold out for them, and they deserve to work with us. I saw a bumper sticker on my way to this conference that said, "When the people lead, the leaders follow." These are some of the boundaries that keep me human and creative in a job. Now, I'm certainly not going to push this list across the desk at a job interview, and it's subject to change, but it's a good foundation, and it was fun to actually create it for today. I was sitting on the airplane once, and I was sitting next to a CEO, and I asked her, "Why do executives need coaching?" I was just curious what her take would be as an executive herself. And she said it's because the skills that get us to the top don't help us stay there. So we fake it till we make it, and then we need our humanity back. So I'm really advocating for people at the beginning of their careers not to even lose it, not to even lose their humanity. Be selective at the start when you are trying to get your foot in the door, but not just any door, the right door. You know, pretend to know software, but don't pretend you don't need fresh air. When I do cross my own boundaries, this gives me a rubric to explain it to myself compassionately. Like, hey, I know I said I wouldn't work unpaid overtime, but I'm really obsessed with this scene right now, and tomorrow we'll take a little longer break, okay? Like, having those internal conversations can be based on knowing what your boundaries are in the first place. Because I'm an editor and an assistant editor, here are some examples that are specific to the edit suite, including I will communicate permissions to my assistant, I will set expectations early, I will communicate about slow and busy times, I will not do other people's jobs. And as an assistant, I will ask my editor and managers about priorities, I will lead as needed, and I will push past guilt to advocate for my needs. I want to take a minute to talk about I will lead as needed. As assistant editors, we have a lot of leadership skills. We have organizational skills, and we're in constant communication with all of the other departments. So rather than waiting for our editors to sort of tell us what to do, or, you know, can we take a break, and being lost in these communications, let's use our leadership skills and ask them those leading questions. I find editors, as an editor myself, I love it when my assistant communicates with me and keeps me ahead of the game and keeps me helping her or him have the energy saved up for when I need them in more stressful times. Permissions are like the opposite of boundaries. They're like how to say no but say yes. Saying things like, I can work late every day except for Fridays, and I can come in during the week but I can't come in on weekends. Like preempting some of those things that you'll be asked to do that might cross your boundaries. As an editor, I love to tell my assistant, please take a break anytime I do. And even though I'm working late, you can go home when you're done. Just check in with me before you head out. Let's protect each other's energy so that we have more energy for our creative flow. We don't know what to say. The shortest boundary is no. But we often want to soften the blow. I think that every boundary will have customized language for every situation, every different person. So I've created this formula that I find really helpful. When we want to set a boundary, we're often afraid to do so because someone might question our values, they might question our integrity. So I like to front load that value that someone might question. That sounds like saying, I'm really excited about this project. Now no one can question that. I need to take this Friday off for my sister's wedding. I've asked Angela to fill in for me. Let me know if you'd like to discuss. So the formula is value plus need plus solution plus willingness to discuss, if you are indeed flexible and willing to discuss. The hardest part about setting a boundary is not saying it the first time. It's actually holding the boundary, repeating it. So keeping it short and repeatable is really important. Here are some more scenarios. When you're asked to work through dinner, front load that value. It's important to me to do all I can to meet our deadline. I will be more effective if I take a dinner break. I'll take 30 minutes at 7 p.m. and export thereafter. You're giving the solution simply and expressing what you need to address their concern. When you want to have a weekly appointment, I know so many assistant editors who feel like they can't go to therapy because of the unpredictable schedule. And there's nothing more important for our being effective than taking care of our mental health. So in a job interview, in the first days of the job, saying, I have a weekly appointment on Thursdays at 1 p.m. If there's ever a conflict, I will be sure to reschedule or find coverage while I'm away. Having that open dialogue, not just writing off that you can't take care of your needs. When someone raises their voice during a meeting, this is going to be a rigid boundary for me. I'm going to say something like, I'm going to take a moment. Let's revisit this conversation when we are both calm. And if that's not possible, I will hang up or leave the room. And practicing having those boundaries before the scenario happens gives you the muscle memory of how you're going to behave when they do happen. And as I said before, taking short breaks. I can't wait until this industry changes in a way that I never have to hear people are afraid to take breaks again. Saying something to my editor like, I'd like to step out for 30 minutes, but let me know if you need anything before I leave, creates dialogue and freedom and actually creates connection and keeps us both in our creative flow. So we've talked about setting our creative values, tuning into our needs, and discovering the rewards of pushing through the discomfort to set boundaries. Now what are we going to do with all that safety? We're going to expand, we're going to seek joy, we're going to geek out, we're going to experiment, we're going to focus, we're going to play, we're going to flow. Boundaries aren't meant to keep us small. They're meant to allow us to take risks and expand. They allow us to achieve creative freedom. Thank you so much. Let's dare to take care of ourselves and let the industry adjust. Thank you. Thank you. The creative results will be mind-blowing. So you can reach out to me at my email address or on Instagram, join my newsletter, or reach out on my website. And I hope to talk with all of you before you leave today.